All right, so let's take a look at where we were last time. So now when I move my mouse around, you can see I can kind of pivot around my character's center point. And actually what I want to do is I feel like it's still way too close. So I'm going to go inside of my example character blueprint, and if it helps, you can drag it into the scene to see. And I'm going to go to the spring arm here, and I'm going to go a little bit further. Let's go 400 and compile and save that, and then just go back to our level, and that looks pretty good. And let's delete this one out and then just press play again, and I kind of like that a little bit better, so it gives me more of a view of my character. Now let's go ahead and set up some controls for our character. So inside of our example character blueprint here, and looks like, oh, not this one, sorry, our robot character, that was our previous one, sorry. We have these input axes here. So I'm going to highlight both these, move them down, and press the C like cat key. Or you can right click, maybe not right click, you right click on the node and you do create comment from selection, or you press C like cat. And I'm going to make this, just name this camera movement. So and that also kind of gives you a nice little container that you could move it around. All right, so the next thing is, let's compile and save this so it locks in that camera movement. If we go to our project settings here, notice that it gave me these axis mappings here where it says move forward backwards, and they have it mapped to W. So W, when you push it, it's going to add 1 to the value. So actually, let me kind of show you what's happening here. So let's say that this is our character here. And if we look in the details panel, let's close this out. You'll notice there's a location here. And when we add 1, hopefully you can see this. If I add 1 to the movement, so say I'm moving this direction, do you see how it increases this value, or we're adding 1 to it? But if we move it back, it's actually decreasing that value essentially by 1 all the way until the point where it gets negative. So when we look at our project settings, and if you remember before, you can just hit plus and you can name this whatever you want. Like, this is move forward and backwards, and this is move left, right, and left, and it's mapped to A and D. When I press W, I'm going to add 1 to a specific axis, and the axis that we added or edited is inside of blueprints. So it's the same thing with S here. We're going to -1, and if you have a gamepad, it's mapped to the thumbstick's Y-axis key. So if you don't have these for whatever reason, just hit plus and add them. All right, let's go back to our robot, and I can go ahead and and that's why I like docking it here. I can see there's a move forward. So if I'll right click here and just set them up before I forget. And I'm looking for move forward, and I'm looking for the axis event. So we'll put this here. And then I want the move. And sometimes I have I don't know if I have a bad memory, but I'll forget what axis events are called. And again, that's why I like jumping over here to look. So here's our right and left and our forward and back. All right, so if you look down here, do you remember we had a add controller input, which was sort of rotating around the input of the controller object? What we want to do here is we want to add some movement input. So I'm going to right click, just type the word add and move, and you can see add movement input. And I'm going to press Control C to copy this and then paste it below. And let's give ourselves a little bit of room. Now, if you don't remember how I'm doing this, I'm zooming in and out with that wheel, and I'm right clicking to pan. I'm going to make sure that all of these videos have sort of a nice navigation explanation of the interface beforehand for you to watch. So anyway, here's these movements, these 2 movement nodes here, and then we have our right and left. All right, so let's wire these up. So if I wire this node, so once we hit those W and S keys or A and D keys, it'll call these nodes here, and then I'll push in the value from there. Now, we haven't said anything. So if I compile and play this now, and I press play, you'll see nothing happens. Like, I'm pushing W and S and A and D. And because none of these world direction values are being fed or moved. So for example, if I do 1 here and then 1 on Z, right? And I compile and save this and I press play. Now you can see when I push W and S, it's actually moving. And then A and D is, oh, you know what? We have all that physics stuff, so it's not going to move up on Z. But if I put it in the Y-axis, and oftentimes if you're coming from other game engines, Y is up, for example, in Unity, so it might be confusing. So And also, if you have gravity on your object, it's not going to move. So now I'm pushing A and D and W and S, and it's moving my character around. Now, if I push them in sequence like this, you can see it walks, the character moves at an angle. But that's not the way I want to do it. I want it to be fed in from the press itself. So I'm going to go ahead and zero these out. And it is being fed from the press itself, but I'm sorry, but I want a variable that I can control somewhat publicly that'll push these values. All right, so let's start with getting our current rotation axis. So when I push W or I move my mouse around like this, I want to get that axis and I want to push W so that it walks in the direction of my mouse move. So what I can do is there is a get rotation axis or get control rotation, I believe it is. Let's take a look. Get control. Yeah, rotation. So what this does is this is just getting wherever our rotation position is. And then I want to feed this into the forward vector. So if you're not sure what a vector is, an easy way to think about this without having to get into linear algebra terms and all this is a vector of 3 elements. So so really, this is a vector 3 of the rotation. So we have an x, y, and z. And so our vector 3, quote unquote, variable is storing in those 3 values. So if I get the forward direction of a vector, and I actually can load in the value of that. So let's do this. Let's get this here. Let me move this down a little bit. Give us a little bit more room. All right, so let's wire this into here, and then let's wire this into here. And then remember, we're trying to get the right movement, right and left movement. So there's actually a get right, and we don't necessarily have to get the, here, we want to get right vector. Sorry, let's make sure. We don't necessarily, because remember we have the 1 and -1 that moves our character. So we really just need one area, the right, that will feed this into. So let's feed this into here. We'll be subtracting from that right movement. So it sort of emulates the left. And let's wire this into here. And notice under this target here, there's a self. And what this is why you're not necessarily constantly wiring in the individual components unless you want them. You want this, the control rotation to be of a simple object. Right now, we're pulling it from this, from the highest parent object in the hierarchy, which is this node here. So let's compile and save this. All right, so let's test this out. I'm going to go ahead and press play. And now you can see that the character is moving in the direction that we want it to. So I'm sort of moving around this way. And if I move the mouse all the way down and I'm pushing the W key, it doesn't move because I'm looking straight down and he can't go through the floor. But if I move forward, you can see my character is moving in the direction. Now the character isn't facing that direction. So we're going to have to work on that with a little bit more control stuff as well as the animations that come later, sort of like a look at. So let's go back in here so that the character points in the direction that we're moving to. So go to the character movement node here and look for a orient movement to direction, which is, like, we can also type it in the search, but let's scroll through to see what it falls under. It's been a while since I've done this. Let's just type it in the search. What the heck? There it is. So it's under character movement. So orient rotation to movement. And we check that on, compile and save that. Now when I press play, if I move my mouse and I press W, my character should move in that direction. So now that's sort of like a nice little look at. And I might even move my character even further. Or maybe we'll do it where you can scroll the wheel out and it zooms out even more. But for now, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to keep playing with these values in the spring arm. So maybe we'll go back out 500. And also, what's cool about this is if you have the collision set up right, the camera will actually like not clip through, like certain objects and stuff. See how I'm like kind of. Well, we probably have to set up the collision, but at least this is a pretty good view. And we might even have to scale up the scene or scale down our character depending on how we want to do this. All right, so in the next video, let's go ahead and start to set up some animations for our character.